I'm Michelle from Talmuchly Paper Blooms, and today I'm going to teach you how to make a crepe paper eucalyptus stem. So today we're going to be learning how to make this eucalyptus stem from crepe paper. So this is the Eucalyptus stageriana. It's one I can never pronounce, so hopefully I've got that right. But this eucalyptus stem is a really popular one. You'll see it in a lot of displays, a lot of bouquets. It's a good filler foliage. You can see it takes up quite a bit of space, which is great for filling in gaps in displays and bouquets. However, there's not that many petals, so it's quite a quick one to make but has a lot of impact. The other great thing is that in nature, a lot of these leaves tend to poke up, so they're more like this, almost like a closed display. So you can easily manipulate this to be either more closed and look more natural as you would find it out in the wild almost, or you can have it more open and spread out to create more of a impact in your display, depending how you plan to use it. So it's quite a good one for manipulating to suit your needs, really. If you've watched my previous videos, you'll know that this is part of a bundle of eucalyptus stems. So I actually have 3. So there's this one, then there's the ones behind me as well. So we've got the baby blue at the back and the silver dollar next to it as well. So the templates for all 3 of these eucalyptus stems are available on my website, which is talmuchlypaperblooms.com. So you can actually get them as individual templates or as a bundle, which will save you 20%. So it depends how many of them you're planning to make. But if you are planning to make all 3, then I do recommend you get the bundle because that's going to save you 20%. The other thing you may want to consider is I also have an all access bundle, which is called the VIP B Pass, which gets you access to all of my current paper flower templates and anything in the future as well. So that includes these and all of my other ones as well. And then any other paper flower templates that I launch going forwards, they will also be included. So you'll basically get them for free going forwards. So if you do plan to follow even just a few of my paper flower tutorials and want some templates for that, that's the most cost effective way to do it. Now the price for that at the moment is quite low because I'm only just launching it, but that will be going up every time I launch new templates. So I do recommend that if you're interested in it, you get it now so you get the most value for money. So obviously, as well as your templates, there's some materials you will need to make your paper eucalyptus stems, but I've kept those the same for all 3. So hopefully, if you've made either of the other 2 eucalyptus stems, you already have the materials ready to go. You just need some additional wire and that's pretty much it. And if this is the first of the 3 eucalyptus tutorials that you're watching, then I do recommend you go ahead and watch the other 2 as well because there's things that overlap. For example, the colouring techniques for the leaves is the same method for all of them. The only difference is with the baby blue at the back, that's got slightly more blue in the colouring for the alcohol inks. Other than that, the colouring is the same. So the colouring for this and the silver dollar is exactly the same. So if you've done one and you've got paper left over, you can definitely use that for this. As I mentioned with all 3 templates, I highly recommend that you do use alcohol inks to dye your paper. And that's because I have yet to find a standard off-the-roll crepe paper colour which is the right colour for eucalyptus. Eucalyptus has this kind of washy colour to it, like you can see here. It's not a flat colour, and it's got like a greeny, blue-grey undertone to it, which I just can't find in standard crepe paper rolls. Now, maybe you've found one, and if you have, then please do let me know in the comments below, because that would be great to know about to actually be able to use. But currently I have yet to find one. So personally, I think the best way of getting a more realistic looking eucalyptus stem is to dye white crepe paper with alcohol inks. And then I also use pan pastels just to add a finished layer of detail as well. You obviously don't need to do that. You could just use the standard crepe paper colour and then follow the rest of the steps in the tutorial. However, do be aware that will not look as realistic as if you did this step. But you're still gonna make a great looking leaf, it just wouldn't be true to life. But that's not necessarily a bad thing, it will still look great. But if you get the opportunity, then I do recommend you give both the alcohol inks and the pastels a go to get this kind of colouring. So let's get started making it. So to start with, you're going to need some crepe paper. If you're going to dye your crepe paper, then I suggest you start with a white, or if you're not going to do the alcohol inks and pan pastels, then you can do this with a green instead. For this, I'm using the Leah Griffith Heavyweight German crepe, and I'm using the colour Snowflake. I'll link that down below for you. For the glue, I recommend that you use tacky glue and decant that into a small pot. And then you'll also want some cocktail sticks or toothpicks to apply that with as well. I like to use the Aleene's tacky glue, and again, I'll link that below for you. You'll want a pair of pliers, just ordinary household pliers will do. You'll want some scissors with the fine point detail. These ones are great because they have the spring action, which helps to reduce any strain on your hands. You'll want some floral wire, and I recommend that you get either the paper or cloth covered wire. So you'll want one 18 gauge and 4 20 or 22 gauge wires as well. You'll want some brown floral tape and a big fluffy mop brush like this one. And then also a little jar that you can mix your alcohol inks in. So this is just an old mason jar. For the alcohol inks, I'm using the Tim Holtz Ranger range, and that's in Stone Washed. I'm using the Jacquard Pinata colour in Rainforest. And then the Ranger Cool Perry as well. So you'll also want some isopropyl alcohol, and you can get that from your local pharmacy or supermarket or grocery store. And then also some Pan Pastel, and I'm using the colour Bright Yellow Green Extra Dark. And then you'll want a little sponge to apply that with. I actually just recommend you use a makeup sponge for that. And then finally, I suggest that you protect your workspace. So for alcohol inks, the best way to do that is with cling wrap or plastic wrap, you know, the kitchen stuff that you get on a roll. And then make sure to overlap the layers and smooth them down to stop any ink going between them. Then you want to take your crepe paper and stretch that all the way out. So take that between your two hands and pull that left to right to stretch that as far as it will go. Next, we're going to mix our alcohol inks. So take the jar and the fluffy paintbrush. Then you want to add each of the alcohol inks into the jar, and I'll pop the quantities into the description box below for those. A little goes a long way, so if you're not sure or if the colour's not quite as you're expecting, just add 1 or 2 drops at a time. Don't add too much in one go. You can always build it up. And then you want to add about an inch or so of the isopropyl alcohol into the bottom of the jar as well, and give that a good mix with the paintbrush. The next step is just as simple as painting it on. It doesn't need to be anything precise or anything too fancy. You just want to make sure you cover the whole paper, and then make sure you blend out any patches that have got excess ink on them. Do be careful not to put too much ink onto the paper, otherwise you might start to see the creases from the cling wrap underneath once it's dried. And then make sure to allow that to dry fully before you proceed. So once it's fully dry, we can then move on to the next step. Now, one of the things to be aware of with dyeing your paper this way is one side will be darker than the other. And which side you choose to use is totally up to you. It actually doesn't really matter because they're both similar, they're just slightly different shades of the same colour. So it's personal preference, or you can actually mix and match, so have some of the paler side, some of the darker side. But make sure that when you're cutting out your leaves, you're doing it from the same side so that both halves of the leaf are either dark or light. Individual leaves can easily be different from their neighbours, so if you want one dark, one light, etc., that's totally fine. Just make sure that the leaf itself matches with the other half. So before you get started cutting, stretch out your paper again fully because it will have shrunk a bit as it's dried. And then I find it easier to fold that over so that you're cutting multiple layers at a time, and how many layers you can do will depend how sharp your scissors are. Make sure that the grain lines in the paper, so that's the lines that run top to bottom, line up with the grain lines marked on the template as well. So you'll notice there's 3 little lines marked on each of the templates, and that's indicating the grain line in the paper. It's really important that those match with the paper itself. So you can go ahead and cut out all of your leaves. So you'll have 2 halves to each leaf, and the quantities for each of those are marked on the template as well. So I like to cut both halves of each leaf together. So you'll see here I'm folding it over so that I've got both sides at the same time, and that's just to help in case there's any variation in the colouring. But you'll also notice that I'm actually trimming the second half, and that's because there's a slight difference in the template, so just be aware of that when you're cutting them. It just helps them to look more realistic. If you'd prefer not to do that, you can just do the 2 sides to be the same. And then once you're happy with each side and that they match, you can also turn them over and check which of the shades you would like. So some of them are darker, some of them are lighter, depending on where they were in the paper. And then just make sure you have either 2 darks or 2 lights rather than 1 dark and 1 light, otherwise they'll look a bit strange. So you can then trim your wire. So the easiest way to trim your wire is just to fold it into thirds. So you can just roughly bend that into thirds. It doesn't have to be too precise. And then actually for this thinner wire, you should be able to cut that with your scissors. If your scissors won't cut it, then just use your pliers instead. And then for the bigger leaves, we're going to do half a wire instead, just to give us a bit more room to work with. So I find it helps to turn all the leaves to be the wrong way up before you start. So what you're looking at here is actually the back of the leaf. So you just need to decide if you're going to do the front or the back as the light or the dark, and then turn them over accordingly. So once you've cut all of your wires, just go and straighten those out. Because we've bent them, the ends might be a little bit turned over, so you can just straighten those out with your fingers. And you can just get them roughly straight. They don't need to be too precise, just so that we don't have any weird bends within the actual leaf itself. The next step is to add some glue. So you're going to take the tacky glue that we decanted into the pot at the start, and using a cocktail stick or a toothpick, you need to just run a small line of glue along the back of the leaf. So then run your layer of glue just along the edge of the leaf here. And it also helps to do all of the same side as you're working. So for example, here I'm doing all of the left halves of the leaf, just so you don't get confused as you're working. You don't need a huge amount of glue here, just a thin line right on the edge is fine. And then press your wire into that as close to the edge as you can. You want to leave a little bit of a gap at the top of the leaf so that there's room to fold the paper over as well. And you'll see here I'm doing this in a batch, and that's just to give the glue a chance to get a little bit more tacky. So as it's exposed to the air, it dries and becomes more tacky, and it actually makes it easier to work with. So we're going to go back to the very first one again, and now run an extra layer of glue right along the top of the wire. And this only needs to be a very small amount of glue, we don't need much here at all. And then fold over the edge of the paper around the wire. So you want to fold this as closely as possible that you can to the wire so that it covers it, but without much more of an overlap. So you want it to just cover the wire. I also find the easiest thing to do with this is to use your thumbnail because it gives it a nice crisp edge as well. Once you've folded that over, run your fingers along it to make sure it's sealed down. And then we're going to add another layer of glue in the same place along the back edge of the leaf. So this will cover the area we just folded down. Turn it over. Turn the other half of your leaf over as well. So you're now looking at the front of the leaf for both halves. And then line those up so the centres are roughly right. The easiest way to do this is to line up the bottom of the leaf. So you'll see the top looks a bit weird right now, so don't worry about that, just make sure the bottom lines up. And then run your fingers along it, make sure it's all pressed into place, and then you can smooth that out as well. You can also turn it over and make sure that the overlap is right, so you're just basically trying to hide the wire. So as long as that looks nice and neat, that's all that you need. And then we're just going to repeat that process for all of the leaves. This technique with the leaves is actually a really good one to know as well, because you can basically apply it to any leaf. So a lot of leaves, you can use the same principle, and as long as it's not a really tiny leaf, in which case you're probably not going to want to add wire to it, just because it'd be too fiddly. But for most other leaves, you can use the same technique, which gives you the nice V shape in the grain line, so it looks more realistic. It looks more like the veins of an actual leaf. And also you've got the wire in there to be able to bend it and shape it to be more natural as well. And really then you can use any leaf template to make leaves such as this. So some of my leaves here have kind of warped a little bit at the top as we've been working. That's completely normal. It's just unfortunately what happens when you're adding the glue. It stretches it a little bit. So all you need to do is just go back in and trim those down to be the natural shape. Personally, I just like to freehand it, but you can use the template if you're a bit unsure. You just want to make sure that the center line of the leaf is in the center of the point, and then obviously that needs to be a bit rounded. It's not a sharp point for this leaf. The next stage is to add the pan pastels, and you might be wondering why we're adding yet more colour when we've already dyed the paper, but it really helps just to add that extra layer of detail and make them look more realistic. So the green of the alcohol ink is quite a processed colour, it's not so natural looking, and it is showing up brighter on camera than it is in real life, for me at least. And that's just because of the lighting. Obviously, I've got quite intense lighting to be able to show you how I'm working. We need good lighting to film it, right? So it's kind of affecting the colour a little bit. So it looks more intense on camera than it does in real life for me. But still, adding this extra layer of green, and I would class this green as like a dirty green, it just makes it look that much more realistic. It kind of adds a bit more depth to it, and it really helps to tone down that artificial alcohol ink kind of colouring. But you do need both. I've tried it without the alcohol inks and it doesn't work as well. So you do need the combination to make it look right. So I definitely recommend you give this step a try as well. So all you need to do is take your sponge, dab that gently into the pan pastels, and you really don't need very much at all. A little bit will go a very long way. And then just gently rub that into the edge of all of the leaves. So work your way around both sides, so the front and the back, around all of the edges. And pan pastels will last a long, long time. So this tin of pan pastels I've had for about 5 years already, and I've used it on so many different leaves. So they are a bit of an investment. They're not that cheap to buy up front, but if you're going to be making a lot of flowers and leaves, they will last you a long time. And then the next step is to wrap all of the stems with your floral tape. So this does two things. It obviously changes the colour to brown, so that's more like nature. But also you'll notice it kind of adds like a bit of a bumpy texture to it. It's not the straight, very linear lines of the wire. You get like bumps and bits that are a little bit thicker than the other areas. And actually that starts to help to make it look more realistic too, because it's more like the thickness of a stem or a branch that you would get in nature as well. So you don't need to intentionally add those in, just wrap the wire, but it will happen as you're working anyway. So it's just like that extra detail that really helps to add more lifelike qualities to your work. So to add your floral tape, stretch out the first little bit, and that will activate all the glue that's within the tape itself. And then I like to add some tacky glue both at the start and the end of each piece of tape. And if it's a long piece of tape, I'll also do some in the middle as well. You don't technically need to do that. It should hold on its own. But I have had some come unravelled when I've not done that in the past. So personally, I prefer to add the glue as well. And just stretch that as you work and wrap that all the way down the wire. For this stage, we don't need to cover the entire wire, because most of it will then be covered up again as we attach it to the main stem. So you just want to cover the top few inches. So for the smaller leaves, it only needs to be about 1 inch. And then as you get down towards the bigger leaves, you can cover more of the wire as well. The next step is to take the main stem. So this is your 18 gauge wire. And if you know the height of the wire that you want, this is the time to trim it down. So obviously you're going to have some more height added by each of the leaves, so account for that. Or if you're not sure, just leave it as the full height wire. So this is an 18-inch wire, that's kind of the standard length. So if you're not sure, leave it as that, and you can always then come back and trim it later. But if you do have a particular vase or bouquet in mind and you know the height that you're going to want, now's the time to trim it, and then you can keep hold of that offcut of wire to use for something else. And then once you've trimmed it, again, you just need to wrap that with floral tape. So we're going to wrap the whole of this wire. At the top, I like to start about 1 inch from the top, wrap it around and work my way up to cover the very top, and then come back down. That way you can cover the end nice and neatly and stop the wire poking through so you don't get any sharp edges. When you get to the bottom, keep wrapping after you reach the end of the wire, and that will create this kind of tail of just floral tape with no wire inside. And that just helps to give you a more gradual transition when we're attaching the leaves. So just wrap that round a little bit for maybe about 1 inch or so. It doesn't need to be too precise, and then you can cut that with the scissors. So next we're going to shape all of the leaves, and it's kind of a very loose C shape that you're trying to get inside profile. So the leaf will kind of curve up and over, and then at the very tip of the leaf, that little end piece will curve even more like in on itself. So gently curve over the main leaf to be a very loose C shape. So you can do that between your thumb and your finger, that's the easiest way. And then when you get to the end of the wire, kind of put your thumb underneath and wrap it over the top so it kind of curls tightly around your thumb. If you're not sure, you can also use like a pen or a marker or something like that just to wrap the end piece around. But also you can always come back and adjust these later, so don't worry too much. So we're going to start with the smallest leaf. So we're going to attach that on the end of the main stem where we left the tail. So you'll see here it kind of gives it that gradual connection. So we're going to add glue onto the end of the stem where we're going to attach it, and then attach the leaf so that the top of the leaf is facing inwards. So it might feel like you're attaching it the wrong way around, but once you've added more leaves, you'll see why. So attach that so that the leaf faces inwards, and then wrap that with some of the floral tape. So you want to leave a little bit of space, maybe 1/2 inch to 1 inch at the top, so you have room to bend and adjust that stem. And then we're going to do the same thing with another one of these leaves. So we're going to put those face to face. So this is why I said to kind of have it facing the wrong way almost. So attach that slightly offset. And again, you want to leave a little bit of space, maybe about 1 inch, so you've got room to work with that. And then the third leaf, we're going to drop that down a little bit. Again, maybe another inch or so. These sizes are not exact, so it's just a guide to say an inch. If you want to do more or less, that's fine, just approximately. And again, it's going to be facing inwards, and we're going to wrap that and add some glue as we work. And the process now is exactly the same for all of the leaves. So you can see that I'm offsetting them, none of them line up exactly. And I'm roughly trying to place them so that they are not directly next to each other. They're either opposite or slightly rotated. You can adjust this later on or even as you work, so it doesn't need to be too exact, but just kind of roughly get them in place at this point. Make sure as you're working, you're adding plenty of glue. It's really important to glue these ones in. The floral tape should hold them, but there is always the chance they could slide out if it's not tight enough. So that's also another point. Make sure you're pulling your tape really tight as you work. And then when you get to the bottom of the stem, you can just trim the tape and then add some glue, wrap that round. And then when you've covered the very end, you can just trim that with the scissors. And then all you need to do now is just go back in and adjust each of the leaves to sit how you'd like them to sit. So it's best to do this before the glue dries, but you do have a little bit of time to work with it. So get it roughly how you want it now. The actual leaves you'll be able to mould and change over time, that's not a problem. It's more just getting the position of them right. So you'll see I'm trying to add a bit of a curve onto the wires, particularly close to where they hit the main stem. And I'm trying to make sure that we've got this kind of zigzagged offset, as you'll see here. And then also notice how I'm shaping the leaves, that they're kind of curling up the stem and away. They're not just sticking straight out, they kind of go up and over. So if you imagine how a water fountain kind of goes up and then starts to spill over the top, that's the kind of shape we're looking for. Okay, so there's your finished eucalyptus stem. Hopefully you enjoyed making that and you have some beautiful paper foliage now. If you have enjoyed it, I would love it if you could drop me a review on my website. You can just go to the page where you ordered your template from, scroll down to the bottom and there's a little link that says write a review and you can just drop it in there. And I would really appreciate that. You can also share your photos of your finished creations with me on Instagram. That's at @tarmuchley_paperblooms. And I love to share them with the wider paper flower community. So if you are happy to share them, then do let me know. You can also email them to me, which is blooms@tarmuchley.com. So if you haven't already, then make sure you subscribe to my channel so you get notified when my next video goes live. You can also join my email list at howmuchlypaperblooms.com, and then you'll get notified when new videos go live, when I launch new tutorials, and you'll also get access to the best discounts as well. Now, also a little insider tip, I do offer 5 free templates anytime I launch a new one, and that's only to my email list subscribers. So if you're interested in trying to get hold of those, then make sure you join my email list. And when I send an email, be quick to action it, because there's usually a little link in there to get 5 free. But those 5 free templates do go very quickly. So if you're interested in trying to get hold of a free one, make sure to add me to your safe senders list so that I don't go to your junk mail. And also, whenever you see an email pop up, be quick, click the link in there and make sure you go and add your discount code at the checkout to get that for free. But as I say, that's only available to my email list subscribers. So if you are not on the email list, go ahead and join that right now at howmuchlypaperblooms.com. There's a little pop-up box that will appear and you can just enter your details in there. I'm also working on new tutorials and some videos for tips and techniques as well. So if there's anything in particular you would like to see, then please let me know in the comments below and I'll do my best to include that going forwards. So until next time, happy flower making.